What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. I know it's been like 13 days since we've posted. We do apologize for that. We have been extremely busy with our regular jobs, and it's just been really demanding on all three of us and here lately. And also I've been battling some dental work, and so I've not felt like talking. So my mouth has been really sore, but I'm finally over all that. So today we are on a Wednesday, and you're going to see this video tonight. So today's video is from a viewer. We're doing a viewer request video. He wants to know the difference between cable driven and limb driven rest, the different styles, how they work, pros and cons of each one. So I thought this would be just a good time. It's super hot outside, so you really can't do much, to talk about some gear. Now, you may be looking for some new gear. Now, I'm going to give you the ins and outs of both of them, my personal experiences with both, and we're going to talk about them, and we're going to be civil about it in the comments. I want everybody to be civil. If you don't agree with everything, which I don't expect you to and don't want you to, because I want everybody to have their own opinion. Everybody's going to have their own experiences with it, but let's just keep it civil and polite. Can we do that, guys? Thank you. So today's topic is cable driven versus limb driven. So real briefly, we're going to touch on the third type of hunting rest, which is containment style of rest. So like a Whisker Biscuit, hostage, Octane hostage rest, NAP 360. These are just goober proof. You can't really mess them up. They do cost more to maintain. What I mean by that is these chew up veins over a period of time, so you're going to have to spend money or buy your own stuff to reflet your arrows. I do recommend you shoot a blazer style vein through one of these because they will last a lot longer. Also, when we'll get a close-up of it, you can see that these bristles are wearing out and they need to be replaced depending on how often you shoot. Sometimes it's every year. You may get a bad one twice a year. If you only use your bow during bow season, maybe every other year, just depending on the wear that you put this rest through. So that's that rest. There are some negatives to it. You get a little bit more drag, which is going to affect some speed. I don't know how much speed, and I think I want to test that. I think I want to test that on the Mathews. Just bolt this on, shoot it through, kind of tune it, get it shot through the chronograph, and just see how much speed you actually lose shooting through a Whisker Biscuit versus a fall-away rest. What do you think? Drop it down in the comments below if y'all like to see something like that. On to the next style of rest, which is super popular. That's a cable-driven rest. So this is the NAP Apache. NAP's been around just as long as anybody in the archery industry. They've been around for years. Apache rest is a solid rest. They're machined well. They're quiet. They got a lot of padding on the inside, so it's a super quiet rest. Got a really good moleskin on the launcher arm, so you don't hear the arrow dragging across it. The only knock I will give it and it's anytime you have stuff like this, these little adjustment knobs right here, you can spin them off and put them in different spots to get it to where it's easier to adjust for you or to hide them. They do back out sometimes. It makes a little bit of noise, but you just wax or blue Loctite, tighten them back up. You ain't got to worry about it. There's a little retainer key right here that does make noise whenever you shoot, but this is here to guide your activation cord to make sure it does not get all wampus kitty on you while you are shooting. So the way a cable driven rest works, this is a traditional style cable driven, and it's going to tie to your downward moving cable, and it's going to, as you draw your bow, let me get out of the way, this little launcher, I guess I need to be in the way for you to see the launcher arm, will pick up and engage, and as you shoot, it falls out of the way. Cable driven rest needs to come up in the last 2 inches of your draw cycle. If it comes up any time before that, it's going to stay up too long and cause you some fletching clearance issues. If it comes up after the 2 inches, it's not going to stay up long enough to actually help stabilize the arrow. The next style of cable driven is like this Ripcord, Q80, HHA Vertus. They have a locking mechanism that you can kind of you can cock and leave it there, and your arrow doesn't go anywhere. So this is the second style of rest. These actually have little indicators. The Ripcord, which will zoom in on it, it has little arrow marks right here, so you need those to line up in order for this thing to disengage. So what's cool about this though is when you do let down, it stays engaged and your arrow will not make any noise during a letdown. So that is kind of a nice little feature about this style of rest. But again, if it comes up and it goes beyond them little marks, it is going to stay up for too long, causing causing you some fletching clearance issues, and if it doesn't go all the way down, it's not going to fall properly, again causing some clearance issues and possibly even breaking your launcher arm. I know some of the QADs use a very high tempered plastic, but it's still plastic, they break. One knock that I'm going to give the cable driven rest is the noise levels that come off of it. Is it enough to spook a deer when you shoot? Nope. But it's going to drive you a little mad, okay? And these aren't set up properly. These become a huge headache. You'll think it's failing, and it's just an improper setup. I will say this: if you do not use a draw board to set one of these up, it's probably not set up right. And if you don't check it, your cords will stretch, and you have to retime it until that stretches completely out of that cord. If you do shoot a cable driven rest and you want a cord that isn't going to stretch very much, I highly suggest you check out Pine Ridge Nitro cord. I think it's what it is. It's what I use. It's very stiff and it doesn't stretch very much. I really like that stuff. So it's a rigid material. It'll help keep your rest in tune, okay, which is super important. So the next rest we're going to discuss is a limb driven rest. So limb driven rest goes off your limb, just like a cable driven goes off your cable. So this is a Gen 7X by Vapor Trail. This is their new one that will operate off a top or bottom limb. I got it going to the bottom, but I have it tied to my yoke splitter right here. We'll get a close-up of that as well. You can also put it again on your bottom limb and on these newer bows that are a little bit beyond parallel. Before that happened, before this beyond parallel thing started, you would just tie your cord pretty much even with your cam. But you got to go back a little bit farther, because that's where the actual flex in that cam is back here, and that's what actually raises this launcher arm in here, okay? Now this one's set up and tuned. It didn't take me no time to do it. Literally, I tied my activation cord down here, eyeballed my center shot, threw some levels on the arrow and bow to get everything leveled, ran it 90 degrees, 100%, wove it through here, snugged it, which means you have successfully timed your arrow rest, and first hole through paper, perfect bullet hole. Didn't have to touch it. Okay. Now I'm going to explain why I think that happened. One, I eyeballed it pretty good, obviously. But two, I think the limb driven rest is going to stabilize your arrow a whole lot more than what a cable driven rest does. Why, you might ask? It's because it stays up longer. Cable driven stays up for 2 inches during your draw cycle. Limb driven stays up 70% more. So instead of, if this is where my rest is sitting on a cable driven, I get that much arrow support, right? I get that much arrow support to literally right there where my thumb is during the whole shot cycle. Now once this mark has been hit, my arrow is just floating free through that bow, which I'm losing efficiencies. This arrow is not stabilized as well as it could be. So limb driven, so my arrow's right here at full draw. And I'm still up. Now I start falling. Okay, so now I have went from here to here, which is a lot more stable arrow, because as soon as you shoot, your arrow's under tremendous stress. Okay, it's flexing. So now that launcher arm is supporting it. It is helping stabilize it to take some of that flex out. So when it leaves your bow, it's not having to fight it so hard, which makes it more forgiving, a more accurate arrow downrange. It is going to raise your point of impact. So it can shoot the same bullet hole. You can get them tuned the same. Perfect bullet holes, broad edge or money. You swap one bullet hole, swap the rest from a cable driven to a limb driven, you're going to have a higher point of impact because your arrow is more stable. Okay, it's not necessarily due to speed. You're not shooting necessarily faster. You will retain more speed down range because your arrow is stable. Okay, now there's a reason, and I want y'all to think about this. There's a reason high-level professional archers do not shoot a cable-driven rest. When's the last time you've seen a cable-driven rest on a high-level archer's bow that is shooting for a world national championships type event? I didn't see it either. So, you know, it's going to be a blade rest. which is going to support your arrow the entire shot, all the way through. Now, why I think more people are going to the limb-driven rest is because you get almost the same stability through the shot cycle, but you don't have to worry about this back end so much. What I mean by that is a blade rest, you have to worry about the vein orientation, size, and type of vein, how many veins you put on there. 4-fletch is getting super popular again. This is not the first time the 4-fletch has been popular, by the way, if you didn't know that. It's getting popular again, and a blade rest is probably not going to accommodate a 4-fletch. But, however, a limb-driven rest will. So just keep that in mind whenever you are making this decision to purchase your rest. What do you want? Okay, so let's go over some of the pros that this rest, the cable-driven lock-up style rest, has. It locks up. It locks up, and when you let your bow down, it doesn't fire. Okay, where I let my limb-driven rest bow, my arrow's going to go down with it. So you have to put moleskin, stuff like that, an arrow catcher, in order for your arrow not to make a lot of noise. So, and to me, that's kind of where the pros stop for this rest, because it's a little bit more tedious to tune. You have to constantly check it to make sure the cord hasn't stretched at all. And again, it's not as forgiving. Will you be able to stack arrows in there when it's tuned? Yes. But what happens whenever it comes out of tune because your cord stretched? Well, it's a headache, I'll tell you. Limb-driven rest. The pros to that: easier to set up. I firmly believe I can set up 2 limb-driven rests to somebody's 1 cable-driven and be broadhead tuned. I'm talking from beginning to end. I can do 2 limb-driven rests to your 1 cable-driven. So simplicity. You're knocking out a bunch of steps. Whenever something happens in the field, it's easier to troubleshoot a limb-driven rest because there's no timing involved. There's no man, I wonder if my rest is activating correctly. You know, if your bow operates, a limb-driven rest has to operate because your launch arm has to come up. So it's easier to troubleshoot in the field on a tournament line or in the woods in the backcountry. You can troubleshoot that a whole lot simpler than you can a cable-driven rest. Other thing is noise. They're quieter, in my opinion. I think there's easier ways to tame the noise of a limb-driven versus a cable-driven, because both of them make noise. I'm not going to sit here and say this one's whisper quiet and this one is not. This one has mechanical devices in there that release, and it has a lockdown feature that catches this and makes a noise. This rest does not have that. Okay, this rest does not have that. It does have some string twang. So you can see I got this little bitty old dampener. It's actually a Bowtech dampener. I just like the way it looks, and it works really good. You can tie monkey tails, the wishbones, the cat whiskers on there. You can tie whatever you want on there, and that will deaden what little bit of noise comes from these rests. Now the old style Vapor Trail limb drivers that have the metal forks that come down, yeah, you're not going to do that. But that's more of a tournament style rest, so you're not necessarily worried about edging out that noise. So some of the arguments that have been had over cable driven versus limb driven come from hunters. The biggest one that I have seen is that they do not want their limb driven activation cord to get caught in the brush when they shoot their bow. Say that again real slow so you can hear it. If you are in that tight of brush type situation, you're going to derail your bow. You need to ditch the compound and go get a traditional bow. Okay, and I'm not trying to ruffle feathers, just kind of being a little blunt, and that's okay. It's just, you're going to derail your bow. I have never been in a situation where that was possible. I've never heard of a situation of that like ever happening. I think you have a greater chance of this cable-driven rest coming out of time or failing you than you do of your activation cord on a limb-driven rest getting snagged on something. Another reason I believe that is absurd is because something that is tight doesn't necessarily get snagged. How often do you snag the cables on your bow whenever you're walking through the woods? Probably not. How often does a athletic fit or an athletic cut shirt, like a compression shirt, get snagged on something? Very rare. How often does something that is loose get snagged on something? Pretty often, right? A baggy shirt, baggy sleeve, they get snagged on stuff. They cut. Well, guess what? This is a baggy cord. It's a loose cord. There's no tension on it while the bow is at brace. So that has a greater chance of getting snagged than something that is tight, in my opinion. I could be completely wrong. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Another common misconception is that, well, when I'm stalking an animal, I can't just cock my wrist and forget about it. So the only time I think that this has the advantage in that type of situation is in a ground blind. That's it, because you can cock it and it helps get that arrow up a little higher so your broadhead doesn't really hit the dirt as much. Sometimes though you can't avoid it because of the type of stabilizer you shoot or the type of ground blind or whatever situation may be. Sometimes that may not even help you. I don't know whenever you decide to load your arrow. Is it whenever you're closing the distance on the animal? I would hope so. I hope you don't just get to the property, knock an arrow, walk around willy-nilly, because that's whenever you are at risk for an injury. But it's so you have made the decision to close the distance on the animal, and you're within your comfort zone of making that shot on whatever animal that is in a spot and stock situation. Cool. So when you knock your arrow, you're paying attention to everything, right? Because this is a business end. You don't ever want to be involved with this end of the arrow. So you're paying attention to it. So I don't think that's an issue. Maybe it's a noise thing. I'm not sure how to really interpret it, because you do have the possibility of this arrow making a little bit more noise by hitting your riser. Okay, well, Moleskin, Vapor Trail makes a little limb pad that you can put on your arrow shelf that covers the whole thing. Moleskin the side of your riser, because the cage that's on a limb-driven rest is going to protect it from coming out of that cage, and you're not going to have to worry about that. So if you are in the market for a new arrow rest, I highly recommend a limb-driven rest of any sort. I don't think you're going to go wrong with any of the big players in the game, AAE, Trophy Taker, Hamskea, or Vapor Trail. I don't think you're going to go wrong with any of them. So, if you want to see any other videos like this, drop it down in the comments below if it's something you'd like to see described, discussed, compared, reviewed. Let us know down there in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and until we talk next time, God bless, guys.